mi does héna don lífa corfuing chun sin stúr ina ganifra, agus náta grasta bron áring chuní a hort concrete. Anas gurúta to sofer nila breather, agus anila ganif fasta, agus gur three the creek no freed, three creased or dearna. Directly beseech your Lord our actions by the holy inspirations, and carry them on by thy gracious assistance, that every word and work of ours may always begin from thee and by thee be happily ended. Through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Leaders' questions. I call on Deputy Micheál Martin.
Thank you, Count Corlin. Taoiseach, the government is in negotiations in relation to an extension to the Croke Park agreement. And I'm sure you will agree with me that a fair and just outcome is essential to those talks. However, Taoiseach, there is a growing concern that the outcome will target and impose a disproportionate burden and hit on frontline workers who work on a 24/7 basis and on a rostered basis. About 80,000 workers are involved here. Gardaí, nurses, prison officers, emergency medical technicians, people who do work through the night to protect our communities, to protect our streets, to provide emergency and essential services, and on a 365-day a week, on a 24/7 basis. They're facing, in terms of the proposals now put before the talks, a cut of about 10% plus in relation to their pay, and as a result of changes in their premium pay. And in plain euros, what this means for a Garda, for example, with 10-year services, and these are not my figures, will lose €200 per month, which is €50 a week, which is a very, very huge hit. A nurse on an average pay of €40,000 a year will face a cut of €320 a month. Now, Taoiseach, I would put it to you that these amounts are excessive, and it does represent one group taking an excessive hit as opposed to any other. And what I will also say to Taoiseach, that coupled with this, morale is very low in these services. Morale is very low in the Garda Síochána, for example, and is at a tipping point. I'm not saying this, the Gardaí are saying this to us and to every deputy who bothers to meet them and to talk to them. And we are in dangerous territory here, Taoiseach, and you need to be aware of that. The health sector, Taoiseach, depends on 24/7 rostered frameworks and structures. It can't operate without a 24/7 framework. There are alternatives that should be pursued. In my view, €320 a month of a cut is too high, and €200 for an individual is too high. I would appeal to you, Taoiseach, and to those at the talks, don't sacrifice the health sector or the health service workers as the price to get a deal over the line.
Thank you,
I think it's essential, and the question I have to put to you, Taoiseach, will you ensure that the outcomes of these talks will not target or impose a disproportionate burden on those on the front line working 24/7?
Thank you.
Well, the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform was mandated by government to involve in the process of the new Croke Park arrangement, which is a wage negotiation process, which is currently underway. And it's wrong of anybody to assume that they can state what the outcome of the negotiations will be. What the government want here is a fair and a balanced outcome across the board in respect of what the government's target here is for a reduction in pay and pay levels this year, leading to £1 billion extra of saving by 2015. This is a challenging position for every public servant, and I regard every public servant as being a frontline person in their own way. I've seen the different statements both from the representatives of the trades unions and, of course, you've seen them yourself from trade unions in regard to frontline workers. But I want you to understand, Deputy Martin, that these negotiations are now on. They are at a critical and an intensive stage. And I would say to everybody who has a concern or an issue that they wish to have discussed and negotiated, is to get back in there where the discussions actually take place around that table. So it's not correct for anybody to assume that they can state now what the outcome of those negotiations and discussions will be. When you speak of Gardaí, for instance, we had this yesterday at question time, we have absolute respect for the work that the Gardaí have to do. And I know from talking to Gardaí in different stations that morale was very low. And part of that, Deputy Martin, was the fact that in the year 2009, 10 and 11, in those 3 years, there were 200 Garda vehicles purchased. In 3 years, 200 Garda vehicles purchased. In 2012, there were 213 new vehicles purchased. This year, there's a 5 million allocation. I expect 250 new vehicles to be published. Because the Gardaí, the officers, do need the best facilities to do their job. The pay discussions are going on, and they involve all of the public servants, and I regard the job they do as being absolutely critical to the provision of the best level of public services for our people and for our taxpayers. So rather than attempt to predetermine what the outcome of the negotiations will be, I'd suggest that everybody should focus on what's at stake here. We have to make reductions to get to the point on the path to which we are committed, and that's to have our deficit down to 3% by 2015. This is challenging for all public servants, but the place to work it out is at the discussion that takes place at the table.
Thank you.
The figures that have been presented to me are from people who are at the table. I'm not making these figures up. It's people who are at the table are providing these figures. This is what is being tabled. And Taoiseach, it's people on the front line who feel they are being targeted and who feel the hit on them will be disproportionate. And Taoiseach, I would put it to you that all public servants are not the same. They're not the same. I don't think that somebody and a group of people, for example,
would you please allow
who have to drive through the middle of the night in pursuit of dangerous criminals, as you know and I know and the Minister for Justice know, happens up and down across the border on many occasions in the middle of the night, putting their lives at risk. They are in a different category. Let us not pretend that they're not, that they're somehow similar to others. They're not similar to others. That is why you had premium pay for day one in situations like that. Or people on the streets at 3 in the morning trying to deal with antisocial behaviour. They're different. The role of paramedics or emergency medical technicians who have to perform emergency services at 2, 3, 5, 6 in the morning has to be done. It is not, they're not all the same. And I think we need to acknowledge that, Taoiseach. And that's a fundamental point that we should acknowledge. So I don't buy the divide and conquer approach here, Taoiseach. And the attempt really to single out and target emergency workers for what I'm saying is unfair and a disproportionate hit on their particular incomes. And Taoiseach, that is the core point here. €320 a month.
Thank you, David.
No one to date in the crisis has been asked to take that single hit as an individual. And every individual, irrespective of where they are in the scale, has their obligations, have mortgages and so on like that. You know, in previous occasions, it was across the board. No one was asked to take $320 a month or $200 a month for that matter. And I think, Taoiseach, that's the point I'm making. And in the context of the morale, the Minister for Justice is very clear that there's no there's no low morale in the Gardaí. I'm glad this morning you've acknowledged that there is. And we're just listening to people on the ground.
Deputy, I have to ask you to
I would put it to you, there's a problem out there, Taoiseach, with emergency workers. I'm not making this up. I've been meeting all of them.
Deputy, would you please resume your seat? Thank you.
Of these talks to deal with that.
Now, before you reply, Taoiseach, would you mind, listen, would you please, I'd ask deputies to respect the person who's asking the question and the person who's going to reply. Neither of them need your help from the back benches or anywhere else. So please, silence, please. Thank you. Taoiseach, without interruption.
I'm not at all taken by the mock anger of Deputy Martin in this matter. Everything you say these days is going back on what you yourself signed off on here. In fact, in respect of the plan that you signed off and your government signed off on, in respect of the Gardaí, you might recall that for 2012, 2013 and 2014, what you had signed on in your plan for the Garda Síochána, because the Minister for Justice was able to recalibrate that. There's actually 90 million more available for Gardaí and for what they do.
Would you please?
For each of those 3 years, because of the situation that you had left the state in. And the reason, Deputy Martin, that we have to do all of these and make all these challenging decisions is because of the mess that was created by yourselves. Now, I respect the work that every public servant does, and this is not an easy position for a great number of people, but I also trust the people who negotiate these talks to sit around the table where these wage discussions are taking place and to work out a fair and balanced situation across the board, so that you're not going to have a situation where anybody feels that they have been deliberately discriminated against or targeted against in these discussions. And that's why, Deputy Martin, you know this, that you can't judge the outcome of any of these discussions by taking bits and pieces of comments, allegations, speculation, and throwing figures here and there. These are intensive and serious wage negotiations. They are being conducted by professional people between the unions and management, and I hope that everybody who has an issue, who has a concern and an anxiety, will sit down at that table and negotiate in a professional way a fair and balanced outcome for everybody, so that we get on with dealing with the problem of our country here. 12 billion deficit this year, 9 billion next year, and 5 billion the year after. That's the unholy mess that we have to clean up. We're set on this course, and that's what we're going to do. I would urge everybody involved in these talks to sit there professionally and work it out in a way that we can have a future for all those who come behind us.
Deputy Adams, thank you. Without interruption, thank you. Deputy Adams, please. Sorry, would you settle down up there? Settle down. A cup of coffee might help. Deputy Adams. Sorry, I suggest you go for a cup of coffee while we get on with the business. Thank you. Deputy, would you please? Deputy Adams, thank you.
Taoiseach, yesterday the women of the Magdalen Laundries heard the words that they needed to hear, and it's now crucial that they're properly compensated for what was done to them. Tásogat go tus mai is lahan ober agus rintu araid go han mai agus cur na man ra falcha rov vida focal go han flahul. So today, Taoiseach, I want to tease out with you some of the details of Justice Quirke's terms of reference. An ex gratia scheme is to be established. Now, that's essentially a payment without admission of liability. Taoiseach, is this not at odds with the sentiment of your remarks last night and with the McAleese report, both of which accept that the state is liable for what happened to these women? Will Justice Quirke be given statutory powers? Will there be an independent appeal mechanism for the women? And I note that the terms of reference include the laundry at Stanhope Street, but there's no reference to Summerhill in Wexford, and will Summerhill be included as well? And, you know, no one wants runaway legal fees, but I presume some consideration will be given to allowing some form of legal representation to those women who feel they may need it. I mean, women who want to remain anonymously. The advocacy groups only represent a minority of women. As you know yourself, the vast majority of women don't want to be known. So I say all of this in a good spirit, and I commend you again for, and the Taoiseach and the government for your remarks last night.
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach.
I thank Deputy Adams for his remarks in this matter. One of the really strong points coming from the groups of Magdalene women was that they wanted the state to apologise, but they also wanted a system that was effective, that was clear, that was fair, that was non-adversarial and non-legalistic. And the terms of reference drafted presented by the Minister for Justice to Cabinet and adopted by Cabinet for Mr. Justice Quirke are to work out a scheme and a strategy that will give recognition to those principles. And that's why That's why the Justice has been asked to report back within 3 months, but to put in place a set of recommendations for government to consider in regard to the fund, in regard to how it should be dispensed, taking into account those principles of not being adversarial, not being a gravy train for those who might assume so from a legalistic or an administrative point of view. And that's a very strong wish and a very strong desire expressed by the women who were in the Magdalen laundries, and that's what we want to try to achieve here. I think the President of the Law Reform Commission, Mr. Justice Quirke, is an exceptional choice to actually do this, and I'm quite prepared to let him start his work with his team to address those principles, Deputy Adams, so that we can deal with this as comprehensively, as sensitively, as compassionately as possible, taking into account the fact that some women have never told their story, that some want complete anonymity, and we do not want this bandied about in a way that would, have a devastating further impact on them. So what's involved here is we've done step one. The process is now in train for persons to contact the Department of Justice on the instructions of the Minister. Mr. Justice Quirke will start his work in devising a set of recommendations for government to deal with, as I said, taking those principles into account. And we'll take the advice, as the case may be, of members of the House who were very supportive of the motion yesterday as this work proceeds.
Thank you. Deputy Adams.
Well, thank you, Taoiseach, and I accept that Justice Quirke is a very good person to head up this, but he will be bound by his terms of reference, and he can't act outside his terms of reference. So all the questions I have raised are very, very valid questions. Indeed, some of them have been raised by advocacy groups for the Magdalen women. And what we need to ensure is that no one is unjustly excluded from compensation. I remember a number of us brought in the women sufferers from symphysiotomy, and we gave them a standing ovation. It was up until last night the best occasion I spent in this Dail, but the symphysiotomy sufferers are still waiting for justice. The survivors of the Bethany homes were failed by the state and are not part of this scheme, so will the government take up their case as a matter of urgency? And the issue around Summerhill, you didn't answer that, Taoiseach, in your response. I would trust that we will have the opportunity to tease out the detail of these terms of reference. For example, it says that it refers to, in the terms of reference, women who are now resident in Britain, but it doesn't say anything about women who are resident in the States and in other places. There is no commitment, and I welcome the Tanish's remarks in this regard, as to whether the religious orders will be asked to contribute also to compensating these women. So this is an attempt, Taoiseach, to get prompt, transparent delivery of what you did last evening. And I stress, I think this is a non-party political issue. I stress that the questions I'm asking are very, very valid questions, and we need to get answers to them.
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach.
Yeah, the Minister for Justice is looking at the question of the Bethany home, which wasn't a laundry, which was dealing with health and welfare in respect of young women and their children. When you go through the terms of reference which are set out for Mr. Justice Quirke, it is to give expression to simplicity, effectiveness, compassion and comprehensive dealing with it. And that's why the report itself, as Deputy Adams is aware, is a very complex report which covers a huge range of individual circumstances and individual stories. And that's why the women in particular wanted this done in a non-adversarial, non-tortuous, litigious way of dealing with it. And that's why Mr. Justice Quirke We'll look at the question of identifying the criteria and the factors that are to be taken into account to facilitate the early establishment and the effective conduct of a scheme for the benefit of those women who were admitted to and who worked in the Magdalen Laundry and in Stanhope Street. You're also aware that because of the exceptional work done by the Step-by-Step organisation in Britain, dealing with substantial numbers of people who were in the Magdalen Laundry, that the government decided to allocate 250,000 for the work that they are doing once the relevant paperwork insofar as their charitable status is dealt with. And also, Mr. Justice Kirk has been asked to examine how best to operate the fund of a sum sufficient to meet the requirements that he sets out. And obviously, that will take into account the engagement that he has with the Magdalen people over the next 12 weeks. And also then to look at the question that we have all referred to here: what supports do some of these people need? Counselling, medical cards, mental health services, and other welfare needs. And the point that was made by the Minister for Social Protection to make sure that there's a disregard here, in that if there is an allocation made to them, that it doesn't impact upon their social welfare payments, and the same to apply in the case in the case of those who are in England, because if you give a direct payment, it can impact upon the social welfare or social security payments that they receive. I'd have to say to you, one other issue that was very strong from all of the women I met is that they did not want a repeat of the redress board. They did not want that, Deputy. They did not want a repeat of the process of the redress board, and they were very strong about that. Under no circumstances did they want that. And that's why what we try to do here in these terms of reference is to be simple, effective, non-adversarial, non-litigious, and at the same time try to be as fair and balanced as possible.
Thank you.
So, well, Summerhill is an issue that the government can consider, obviously, in due course. I know that that's the one in County Wexford, and there are, it's a matter for the Cabinet to consider that in due course.
Thank you.
So as this work proceeds, obviously, I think everybody in the House here wants to get this, to do it in the best way possible. I think that's where we should be.
Deputy Halligan, thank you.
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. First of all, Taoiseach, can I take this opportunity to compliment you on the remarks you made in the presence of the Magdalen women here yesterday. I know every word you said was sincere, and I also want to pay tribute to the bravery of these women that were here in the House. Taoiseach, last week the Children's Rights Alliance report card in 2013 simultaneously awarded Ireland a grade A for strengthening children's constitutional rights, but an F over the levels of child poverty in this country. And Taoiseach, the grade reflects the devastating impact which successive austerity budgets have had on children. And Taoiseach, the current proposals to target child benefit as a mechanism for the redistribution of wealth will have a serious disproportionate effect on mothers and children. Any attack on child benefit is an attack on women. It really is as simple as that. And Taoiseach, would you agree that mothers have a special position in our constitution, and credit must be paid to the women in the 1970s who successfully lobbied for child benefit to be paid to mothers rather than fathers, for a very good reason. And in agreeing to do so, Taoiseach, would you agree that the state recognises the work of women in the home, and we should uphold this recognition by leaving universal child benefit untouched? Taoiseach, before I go into the two questions, some startling statistics have been released over the last number of months. First of all, we're all aware that women are the main victims of domestic violence, but that domestic violence cuts across all classes and levels of income. Workers in domestic violence shelters will tell you that child benefit is often the only source of income a woman can turn to in escaping from a violent household. They'll also tell you that some men use money as a way to exert pressure and control in a relationship. So how many women, for instance, are denied access to the family finances, and how child benefit is often the only money they get to see. My two questions to you, Taoiseach, are quite simple. Would you agree that universal child benefit is a financial recognition of Article 41.2 in the Constitution, which recognises the valuable contribution to the state that a woman makes through her work in the home? And can I also ask you, will you give a commitment here to the hundreds of thousands of women in Ireland who are now beginning to worry already early into the year, before we even talk about next year's budget, that they may be facing some sort of cut in child benefit? I want to reiterate, I fundamentally disagree with any cuts to child benefit from any woman, irrespective of the salary, based on the statistics that very many women, even with a reasonable salary coming into the household, rely statistically on child benefit only. And I would ask you now to give a commitment to the women of Ireland that no matter what happens over the next year, that child benefit will not be interfered with.
Taoiseach.
Thank Deputy Hannigan for his comments and for his question. The advisory group on tax and social welfare was established to deal with a number of specific issues about the interaction between tax and social protection systems, and to recommend cost-effective solutions as to how employment incentives could be improved and better outcomes achieved where poverty is concerned, particularly child poverty outcomes. I might say, for the information of Deputy Hannigan, that report is now published and is available for everybody to discuss, which is the purpose of the government giving that consent yesterday. This will go before the Oireachtas committee, I think, in the next couple of weeks for discussion also. It's important to note, Deputy Hannigan, that in 2013 the department will spend over €2.8 billion on supports to families and children through payments like child benefit, which is €1.9 billion, family income supplement of €220 million, and qualified child increases on weekly social welfare payments €694 million, back to school clothing and footwear €49 million. And that accounts for about 14% of expenditure through the social protection vote. Now, the group felt it necessary to examine how better targeted support to low-income families in order to reduce poverty and to improve work incentives. And it looked at two issues: the taxation of child benefit and a two-tier child income support payment proposal. But the advisory group is very clear that child benefit should continue to be paid on a universal basis. So the committee now will make its views known on the report. It's a very good report produced by Éireann Mangan. It will come back to government in due course, and in any event, we'll have plenty of discussion about it here. But there would be, quite a lead-in time before any full implementation of whatever the decision might be here is. So basically, the universal payment is fundamental. But the question around the advisory group's report was, one, look at the question of taxation of child benefit, and two, look at the question of a two-tier child income support, where you would give a universal across the board, where you might reduce the higher paid and produce it for lower income families, or translate that into supports for families for childcare, preschool and all that kind of area. So this is an issue that I think every deputy will have an interest in. It's a good report. I hope that people will read it and we'll have a discussion about it here. But first of all at the Oireachtas committee before it comes back to government.
Thank you, Deputy Hannigan.
Taoiseach, the worry is when you speak about income redistribution, that everybody knows that that means cuts. Now, all we're asking is quite simply that those who need child benefit will not be cut. There's interesting statistics, Taoiseach, from ARC Life Insurance, and they said that women working in the home spend an average of 150 hours per week on childcare and housework. If they were to be paid the minimum wage of €8.65, they'd earn €956 a week. So they're getting very, very small income for the work they do in the child benefit. The third point I would make, and I would make this point again, that if you want to speak about redistribution and people that have very high incomes, well, make a suggestion on taxing it. But do not touch those on middle incomes, low incomes, those that are specifically affected by the last number of austerity budgets, which ranges, in my estimation, from people even earning 40, 50, 60,000. I think we have to look at this quite carefully, or we seriously risk driving more women into poverty and more children into poverty.
Thank you. Taoiseach.
Well, given the economic constraints on the country, clearly there's a challenge here for a great number of people. Obviously, you have a situation where, with 430,000 on the live register, we have an unemployment situation that is unacceptable. And obviously the answer to a great deal of these problems is to have employment and work created. But the issues that you raise, Deputy Hannigan, are precisely the issues that are dealt with in the report. And that's why I think that the all-party committee of the Oireachtas should have a decent analysis of the report and give its recommendations. And they'll come back here for a discussion in the House itself, and eventually we'll come back to government for a decision. But let me say again that the advisory group were very clear in one fundamental issue, and that is of the importance of the universal payment. So the issues that you have raised are precisely what's in that report. So we'll have the opportunity to hear your views and that of others, Deputy Hannigan, over the coming period.
Thank you. That completes leaders' questions for today. We now move on to the order of business.
Ceann Comhairle, the order of business shall be as follows. Number 19A, motion regarding report on the Committee of Procedure and Privileges on a complaint made under Standing Order 59. Number 6, Finance Bill 2013, second stage resumed. It is proposed, notwithstanding anything in standing orders, that 1, the Dáil shall sit later than 9 p.m. tonight and shall adjourn not later than 10:30 p.m. Number 2, number 19A shall be decided without debate. Private members' business shall be number 104, which is a motion regarding mortgage restructuring resumed to conclude at 9 p.m. tonight, if not previously concluded.
Thank you. There are two proposals to be put to the House. Is the proposal that the Dáil shall sit later than 9 p.m. tonight agreed to? Thank you. Is the proposal for the dealing with item 19A, motion report on the Committee on Procedure and Privileges on a complaint under Standing Order 59 without debate agreed to? Agreed. Sorry. This is on procedure. Deputy.
As the only member in the technical group who can make a point on this,
This is procedure.
No, indeed. Deputy McGrath, as this relates to Deputy McGrath, he feels that this issue, which concerns him, should not be taken without debate, that he should have an opportunity to make a statement in response to that. And I think out of any sort of due process or natural justice, whatever you want to call it, he should be allowed to speak in his own defence. And I think the government should allow that.
Taoiseach.
Well, he should have thought of making a statement before.
I mean, this is in the announcements of public business, and the question is that the Dáil adopts the report of the Committee on Procedure and Privileges regarding a complaint made under that standing order in regard to Deputy McGrath on the 14th of June 2012 during the course of the debate on the second stage of the Residential Institutions Bill, which was laid before the Dáil, taking into account the fact that Deputy McGrath was given ample opportunity to withdraw his remarks. He's of the opinion that the remarks were irresponsible and did constitute an abuse of privilege, and that Deputy McGrath should be censured accordingly. The Deputy did speak on that. He had plenty of opportunity to withdraw his remarks, and he could have availed of other matters.
I now put the question that I put the question that the proposal for dealing with item 19A, a motion report on the Committee on Procedure and Privileges on a complaint made under Standing Order 59 without debate be agreed to. Na tiachti atá héifna tarishina abadish tom. Na tiachti atá na kina abadish ni. Sheila McGool and Kestrich. Vote. Could I ask deputies to please take their seats? Thank you. Sorry, please take your seats. Thank you. Proposal number 2 by... Sorry, would you please? Thank you. Proposal number 2 by An Taoiseach on the order of business. The question is that the proposal for dealing with item number 19A, motionary report of the Committee on Procedure and Privileges on a complaint made under Standing Order 59 without debate be agreed to. On that question, a division has been challenged. Will the deputies dissenting who are claiming a division please rise in their places? The division will proceed. Tellers Taw, deputies Paul Keogh and Emmett Stagg. Tellers Neil, deputies Matty McGrath and Shane Ross. Taw 90, Neil 21. The proposal for dealing with item number 19A is agreed to. We now move on to matters on the order of business. Deputy Micheál Martin. But it might, be careful.
Just if I may, are we on the order of business?
Yes.
Count Corley. Taoiseach, people woke this morning with worrying news about dramatic increase in mortgages, which, as we know, thousands and thousands of people are under enormous stress with mortgages, 180,000 in arrears, and now further increases coming on top of those on variable rates. And what I want to put to you, Taoiseach, in the context of the personal insolvency bill, can you outline this time schedule in terms of the commencement of the Act in relation to trying to give some help and support to people in mortgage arrears in particular, given that the mortgage supplement, which was a scheme that was there, has been virtually and essentially eliminated by the government. The amount of support that's there now from government and from the Department of Welfare is very limited, and I think will restrict the capacity of the state to help people who will be put into difficulty as a result of this mortgage increase, and it's a very significant increase. And if the finance bill, which is currently going through the House, if amendments to that are proposed in relation to bringing about some alleviation for people in mortgage distress, you're looking at €1,000 a year extra.
We can't debate the issue of what's current on the order of business, but if the Taoiseach is commenting about amendments to the finance bill.
Well, the director of the Personal Insolvency Service is recruiting staff at the moment. It's expected that the Personal Insolvency Agency will be operational in the next couple of months, by early summer, I expect, or probably before that. I'll give the deputy a more accurate read as to when it will actually commence.
Could you let me know what parts of the Act have been commenced to date, and maybe what the plan is, if you like?
The director's been appointed and they're recruiting staff at the moment. I might just say, in respect to that comment that I've seen about mortgage increases, I raised this before with you. We wrote to the regulator in respect to the central bank if they wish to have more authority or more powers to deal with with banks, and if a request is received, it will be considered by government. In respect of claims about a bank increasing interest rates on mortgage holders and on consumers, in the interest of the banks, if they focused on their cost base instead of focusing on consumers here, while government don't interfere directly or direct that interest rates be set at a certain level, it's of interest to everybody that banks should be able to return to profitable business. But in the first instance, in our view, they should look at the cost base that they've got here. I've extended the powers of the Cabinet Subcommittee to deal with mortgages and banks, and I hope we can have new targets for them after the next meeting.
Thank you. Deputy Adams.
When will the report of the expert group chaired by Professor John Higgins on the establishment of acute hospitals groups be published? You may know that there's a lot of raffla about this, a lot of rumours, and that there are fears in the south east about downgrading of the Waterford Regional Hospital, and also that the master of Rotunda Hospital has raised concerns that patient safety may be compromised. So, the quicker the speculation is ended and we can look at the report, the better for everyone. So when will the report be published, Taoiseach? Has it been discussed by Cabinet, and when will it be debated here in the Dáil?
No, it hasn't been discussed by Cabinet yet, Deputy Adams, and the Minister hasn't brought it to Cabinet. I know that there are a lot of both political discussions going on in respect of different areas of the country and medical discussions. I hope it will come to Cabinet in the next, inside the next couple of weeks. There are two factors here: the groups and the impact and the future for local hospitals. They're all very important, both locally, regionally and nationally. Minister will bring that report, I expect, to Government inside the next couple of weeks.
Thank you. Now, we have just 7 minutes left, and there's 14 deputies have indicated, so no speeches, please. Deputy Durkin. No speeches, just what legislation...
Just can't a bit, lads. No, I don't intend to depart from that practice either.
Yeah.
Can I ask the Taoiseach, can I ask the Taoiseach in relation to promised legislation and arising from the concerns expressed by the Chief Justice, whether it is intended to bring forward any of the pieces of legislation that might have a bearing on backlogs or lists, waiting lists in the various courts, particularly the higher courts? And I mentioned in particular the Courts Consolidation and Reform Bill, the Criminal Procedural Bill, even the Probation Services Bill. Can I ask if it might be intended to bring forward selected pieces from within those promised pieces of legislation to address the issues raised by the Chief Justice?
3 pieces of legislation.
All those 3 pieces that Deputy Durkan raises, Courts Consolidation Bill, etc., they're all being worked on, Ceann Comhairle. I referred yesterday, Deputy, to the intention to, which is set out by government in respect of a Court of Civil Appeal, which will require a referendum, which we hope to have in the autumn as well. The Minister for Justice is working on that actively.
Thank you. Deputy Kiss.
Pieces of legislation, could I ask the Taoiseach on the whistleblowers legislation, and secondly on the merger that involved the Human Rights Commission?
Thank you.
That's this session, Deputy Kate. And the second one?
The merger involved the Human Rights Commission.
Yeah, that's this session also, Deputy.
Michael McGrath, Deputy
Human
Michael
Rights
McGrath.
and merger is this session.
Taoiseach, almost a year ago this House passed a Fianna Fáil private members bill designed to give the Financial Services Ombudsman the power to publish complaints records of financial institutions. Now that bill can't go to committee stage until government moves its amendments. Now on national television again this week the current Ombudsman called for those powers. The bill passed second stage. Can I ask when the government intends to move the amendments so that it can be taken to committee stage?
I'll have to come back to you, Deputy McGrath. Minister for Finance is away in London this morning on business. I'll have his office contact you in regard to that matter.
Thank you. Deputy Snuddick.
Taoiseach, in view of the Mangan report on child benefit and the discussions at Cabinet yesterday in relation to a further cut to child benefit, contrary to the Labour Party's policy, is it intended to introduce a supplementary budget in this term to give effect to that report, or what is the budgetary procedure